Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hey everyone, happy Tuesday. Welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I stream at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, on YouTube, on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, and on Rumble, where we talk about all aspects of the culture war, but with a heavy emphasis on doing deep dives into the far left, the socialist left, however we want to refer to it today. The woke left is what I started calling it 3 years ago. And what we usually do is we watch their full-form trainings, we watch their full-form presentations, and we dissect the language, we dissect the strategy. We go back into the archives and actually find out what these people have been doing in the real world, because there is a very stark difference between what conservative influencers are telling you is going on and what is actually going on. And so we go directly to the primary source. That is the only type of information I use. I do not use scholarly academic articles that were written in journals 150 years ago by dead people. We look at what is going on in the real world right now in real time. And because we do this basically every single day of the week, we are years ahead of where your conservative influencers are on Twitter. In fact, has anyone noticed lately? I'm just going to take a point of personal privilege. Has anyone noticed lately that James Lindsay is starting to talk a lot about capitalism? Now, of course, James Lindsay blocked me on Twitter several weeks ago now because I dared to criticize the MILFs for Liberty, because James is right on their payroll, isn't he? So James blocked me on Twitter after I said that, can we please stop banning books? This is a horrible strategy. But see, the thing of it is, and why I was never actually really upset that James Lindsay blocked me on Twitter, I just talked about it to make a point. is that I actually stopped listening to James Lindsay about 3 years ago. And it wasn't because I don't have profound respect for what the man does. I really, really do. I hold him on a very high pedestal. I dedicated the last chapter of my book to him for a reason. I really do believe that if everyone fought as hard as James Lindsay has been fighting for years, we wouldn't be in this mess. But I stopped listening to James Lindsay about 3 years ago because I started deep diving into real world application of what the left is doing. That meant about 3 years ago, at the beginning of 2021, I started spending all my time watching leftist trainings and diversity trainings and college classes and all this stuff, to the point where I have very literally driven me insane. I'm dressed as the Unabomber on the internet. I used to be a normal person. I am now dressed as the Unabomber on the internet. So I started doing all this stuff and I started doing all this analysis because how I analyze data is, first of all, I'm a qualitative analyst. I've never done quantitative analysis, and no poo-pooing on quantitative analysis, but I've always preferred qualitative, and I did my doctoral dissertation in a qualitative manner, which is rare. Not a lot of people do that. And the reason is that how my brain works, and I don't know why this is, but this is just the way it goes. How my brain works. Oh, James Lindsay has given a speech in Parliament. Oh, clutch our pearls while bow down to the Lord High Master of reading academic papers, darling. That just changes everything. James Lindsay has given a speech in front of Parliament? Oh, I guess I should just take it all back. He must be right about everything then, right? He's given a speech in front of Parliament? That means he must be right about everything? This is why you assholes lose. You understand that, right? This is why you lose. Anyway, back to me on my stream. The way that I analyze data and just how my brain works is how it's always worked best for me is if I immerse myself in a situation and just start flooding my brain with qualitative data. I've always been really, 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 really good at pattern recognition. So I can look at a giant mess of data and I start to see patterns in that data that other people don't see. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why my brain works that way and other people's brains don't work that way. This is why I was always really good at organizational psychology, because I could literally go into an organization and just immerse myself in the culture of that organization and flood myself with data. And then I could see the inner workings of how the organization worked. And that was why I was able to help so many of them. And that's why I was so successful at that. So coming into doing something like this, where it's about reverse engineering a massive, 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 massive social system. So I was used to reverse engineering small to mid-sized organizations. That was what I did as an organizational psychologist. I then took it when I started doing this and said, can I apply these skills to a massive 300 million person social system, or however many people are in the United States today? And I started reverse engineering that and just started flooding my brain with data. Well, when I did that, I had to stop listening to James Lindsay, is my point. Because when I start just flooding myself with data, any data that comes in is going to go into the analysis. And so if I had James Lindsay in my head, it would have factored in to my takes on the situation. And I didn't want to be influenced by him. So when I first stopped listening to James Lindsay, it wasn't out of any sort of like personal thing. It wasn't because James Lindsay didn't support me at that point, because he did. James Lindsay stopped supporting my work after that, but I stopped listening to him because I didn't want to be influenced by him. So go a couple years later, and I wasn't really paying attention, and everything I knew about what James Lindsay was talking about was coming from my own audience. It would be like, Carlin, did you hear him say this? Did you hear him say that? Did you hear him say this? Did you hear him say that? Like, my audience would like keep me kind of in check. They'd say, like, every time they heard me saying something, they would be like, oh, James Lindsay said that thing too. And I was like, okay, well, that means I'm probably on the right track with it if he's saying like a similar thing, but I would still not go back and listen to him. And still to this day, like, I will not listen to what it, like, people send me his podcast all the time. This is why, like, he's on my brain right now, is like, people send me, I'm like, I'm not listening to that. But the reason I bring this up is I think it's kind of funny that James Lindsay has been mentioning capitalism a little bit more lately. And the only reason I know that is because people are sending it to me. Who would be surprised if he came out and said whiteness means capitalism at any moment, or if he stopped lying to his audience, because James Lindsay fucking knows better. If he stopped lying to his audience about it being about skin color, because it was never about skin color, was it? It was never about white people. It was never about men. It was never about Western values. Anytime you hear someone say that the left hates white people or men or Western values or Christians, James Lindsay's kind of finally getting on the Christian bandwagon anyway. Anytime you hear people say that the left hates white people, men, Christian, Western values, those people don't know what the F they're talking about. Why is that a problem, Jane? Why is that a problem? I don't consider that to be a problem. Carlin is literally the only one who could critique James Lindsay's work with 100% accuracy. Don't I know it? Don't I know it? Anyway, I just think it's funny that he's starting to say capitalism, 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 capitalism a lot more lately. Well, when you finally hear him admit to his audience that it was all about capitalism from the very beginning, you guys will know where that came from, won't you? Because you guys have been here. So, guys, today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a little bit of a throwback today. So, has anyone heard of, and by the way, I'm not going to talk about the election results. I know people want me to talk about like Iowa. Obviously Trump won. I'm a little see, this is what I'm saying. This is my new streaming look. You know, it benefits me because I don't have to put on eye makeup. I don't have to put on much of any makeup. I just put on like a little light foundation. I'm not even sure I like blended my foundation completely because I was in a rush. Like, all I need to do is put on like a little touch of foundation and I put a hat on and a hood. I'm cool, man. I'm cool. This is my streaming look from now on. Anyway, Prometheus, let me see this. Have you seen the Team DeSantis supporters attack? No. They've been calling Scott Presler the F word. Really? Really? See, here's the thing. Okay, so maybe I'll talk a little bit about what I think about the Iowa stuff from last night. We'll give it like 5 minutes or so. I'll do a little bit of a rant. So last night, we finally got confirmation that Trump is 100% absolutely going to be the Republican nominee for president. And I think most of us knew this. Most of us live in the land of reality, right? But for the past couple months, especially since Trump has not been participating in the debates, the media started going, oh, Trump's not going to win. Oh, it could be Nikki Haley. Could be Nikki Haley. Could be Nikki Haley. How about Nikki Haley? Do you guys like Nikki Haley? Because we like Nikki Haley. Who doesn't like Nikki Haley? So the media has, on both sides, have really been trying to push Nikki Haley on everyone and spinning this narrative that there was any chance in this universe that Nikki Haley was going to win. So that was thing number one. And then on the other side over here, you have the DeSantis supporters. The DeSantis supporters are universally the worst people in the world. And it is bizarre to me that this happened. It really is. Because there was a time that I think many of us really liked Ron DeSantis. However, I don't know who does Ron DeSantis' hiring, but whoever does his hiring needs to be fired because he has managed to surround himself with literally the worst people in the world. They are the worst. Like, they are assholes. They are arrogant. They are entitled. They are elitist. if you said anything, and I came to this from the position of, I don't care I don't care. Like, I really don't care who the Republicans nominate. It doesn't make any difference to me at all. But like, if you said anything on Twitter that was like out of step with supporting Ron DeSantis, all of a sudden you have all these assholes in your replies, like saying that, like acting like frat bros and like just the most douchey people in the world. And listen, man, I've had to interact with a lot of assholes on Twitter. But like, there's just something about these people that is like extra, extra, extra bad. And I'm not the only one that's been complaining about it. Pretty much everyone that doesn't support Ron DeSantis has been complaining about it, because it was like, what people need to understand. It was Ron DeSantis's horrible people on Twitter that turned everyone against Ron DeSantis. It wasn't necessarily just Ron DeSantis grossly mismanaging his campaign from the very beginning. It was also these asshole surrogates that they had running around on Twitter, getting in everyone's business, being dicks to everyone. It was very literally the people on his team that turned everyone against him, because we were like, you guys suck. Like, we might not be able to agree on a lot, but we can all agree that Ron DeSantis supporters suck universally. And they were holding all these Twitter spaces, and I don't know if anyone besides me spent time in their Twitter spaces, but sometimes I would just go in and listen, and it was the most arrogant, elitist, entitled, douchebaggy shit in the world. It was like maddening to listen to these people. Maddening. And then all these Republicans started so-called liberty Republicans in New Hampshire started like shilling for Ron DeSantis in New Hampshire, Jason Osborne. I was like, what the fuck? And then Thomas Massie endorsed Ron DeSantis. Thomas fucking Massie? Are you kidding me? Rottweiler said, I'm not sure if DeSantis is free of blame. Like with corporate stuff, every campaign proposal is approved by higher ups. He has to approve it yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting, but he can't control everything people say on Twitter. You know what I'm saying? This was just bad hiring. They are bad hiring. Purple Rain says, you are 100% over the target because the DeSantis people are the absolute worst. They are bigots and really nasty people. I was done when they said that slavery had benefit. Yeah, that's like, Ron DeSantis has made some dumb decisions, man. Dumb decisions. Anyway, the greatest joy I have had in my life in a while is watching Ron DeSantis lose Iowa, after all of his surrogates were running around saying, he's going to win Iowa, Ron's going to win Iowa, he's going to win Iowa, he's going to win Iowa. And acting like all of us were stupid for not getting on the Ron DeSantis train. There was no greater joy that I've experienced in a while than last night, watching all of his surrogates on Twitter just spiral and seethe and cope, and Reopen Chris blocked me on Twitter. Like that's one of his like chief asshole surrogates that's been running around to all the Twitter spaces. You saw some of his supporters saying, we're not going to vote for Trump, neener, neener, neener. So now it's quite literally, it's not the establishment trying to keep Trump out of office. It's Ron DeSantis's supporters. Ron DeSantis' supporters are the new Never Trumpers. They're awful. And so to watch them, Bill Mitchell, oh my God, Bill Mitchell was losing his shit all night. Dave Rubin was seething and coping. It was so great. But obviously, Trump was always going to be the nominee. Obviously. And I supported Vivek, man. I love Vivek. I think Vivek is the best. I think probably, even though it pains me that I won't be able to vote for him in New Hampshire, I think that dropping out after last night was probably the best strategic move he could make. And he did it so graciously and so beautifully. And didn't Vivek run just like the best campaign from the very beginning of that campaign right up until last night? Like, that guy, please, Vivek, stay in politics. Please run again. Please, 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 please. Because I feel like Vivek showed us what a politician should be. Vivek has set the standard by which we should be holding all other politicians and presidential candidates too moving forward. And if they don't meet that standard, F them. Like the bar has been set. He was gracious with people who opposed him. He talked to everyone. He always had the right message. He was bold in his messaging. He went outside the box, man. Vivek talked about issues no one else was talking about. He said the right things. He listened. Like there is no criticism that I would give him. I mean, maybe like you could nitpick here and there, I'm sure, but like it was just so beautiful and amazing. And he is a once in a generation mind, and he's a once in a generation politician. And the Republicans should have been thanking their lucky goddamn stars that he deigned to spend his own money doing this in the first place. Because Vivek could go retire and buy a private island and be just fine and not engage in any of this. That guy is rich beyond belief. And he did it all himself, which means he can always make more money. He knows exactly how to do it. So Trump is going to be the nominee. He was always going to be the nominee. We should thank God for Vivek, and F. Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. Both of them should drop out and be gracious about it, just like Vivek was. And everyone just needs to get on with it. Now, is that going to happen? No, because the neocon establishment and quite frankly, the Democrats really, 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 really want Nikki Haley. So we're going to have to hear a lot more about Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley for months and months and months until finally she runs out of money, because everyone knows Trump's going to be the nominee to begin with. But I guess like maybe one more victory, and this is the last thing I'm going to say on it, but then we're actually going to get into what we want to watch. I would love for Ron DeSantis to stay in it through Florida, because it would be so goddamn beautiful to have Ron DeSantis lose Florida by like 30, 40, 50 points to Donald Trump. Like, wouldn't that be one of the most amazing things that's ever happened? Now, I don't think that'll happen. I don't think Ron DeSantis is going to want that on his resume. But like that is my dream right now. I want to see Ron DeSantis lose Florida to Trump. It would be goddamn glorious. It would be absolutely glorious. All right. That is my take on the election. And now we actually have to get into business, guys. So let me show you what we're watching today. We're doing a little bit of a throwback. This is from 3 years ago, when I first started watching woke training on the internet. Back when I was still so naive about everything that was going on. We are going to be watching. Does anyone know Dr. Joan Donovan? Let me find this is Joan. Let me just that's Joan. That's actually a really good likeness of Joan. Does anyone know who Dr. Joan Donovan is? Joan Donovan is a crazy woman that used to work at Harvard, and she purports to study disinformation and right-wing extremism. And she used to work at Harvard. This video is from Harvard. It is on the YouTube page of the Harvard office of the VPAL. I don't know what the Harvard office of the VPAL is. Hang on, maybe we can. We should probably know what office this actually is. The Vice Provost for Advances in Learning. So this is on the YouTube page of a Harvard Vice President. And this is from 3 years ago. So this is from, it says 2 years ago, but it's really from March 1st, 2021. So almost 3 years ago. And this Joan Donovan woman, who is just like a crazy left-winger on Twitter, she used to work at Harvard and was researching disinformation about Harvard. Now, I've got good news and I've got bad news. Today, Joan Donovan no longer works at Harvard because she apparently was ousted from Harvard in a scandal, and she made a big stink in the media about it. But do you know where she went? She went to my alma mater. Everyone always ends up at my alma mater, Boston University, where I had like the best college experience. I loved Boston University. Boston University was conservative. When I was there, I hated it at the time, but now I'm thankful for it because I didn't have to do any woke bullshit when I went to BU. I've had to do zero woke bullshit throughout my entire college education. just by happenstance because I happened to go to places that didn't have woke bullshit in them because they didn't all when I was going through school. So back when I went to BU, everything was great. And then the conservative chancellor left. Literally, the year I graduated was his last year. And then it has all gone to shit since then. BU now houses Ibram X. Kendi. BU now houses Joan Donovan in the College of Communication, where I fucking went to the College of Communication at Boston University. I do not approve this. I could rant for hours and hours and hours about the state of my alma mater. I'm not going to bore you guys with that, though. I'm just really annoyed because I loved Boston University so much. After Nick Fuentes left Boston University, it was all downhill from there. That kid didn't even graduate. I should have listened. I should have listened when Nick said he got I was like, well, why would Nick get DEPUS? But I went to BU at a very different time than Nick Fuentes went to BU. So that's a whole other story. Let me just grab some super chats real quick. Elena, thank you. Dare I say, Vivek was a real gentleman. Yes, he was. Vivek makes me want to be a better person on the internet. He does. I don't know that that'll actually happen, but he makes me want it. And I suppose the aspiration is important, right? Tayton pop quiz. Why does the LGBTQ community put 2S in the beginning of 2S LGBTQIA? Carlin knows. I do know. That's a great pop quiz, Tayton. Make sure everyone answer Tayton's pop quiz. And while you guys are doing that, let's go through some other orders of business before we get started with this amazing presentation from Harvard and Dr. Joan Donovan about how to talk about right-wing extremism and disinformation in the classroom. Yes. 2S stands for Two Spirit, Two Spirit, Two Spirit, which we watched yesterday, if you missed it. Well done. Well done, everyone. Well done. Oh, I got another super chat from Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. With white meaning capitalism, how does the term white savior come into play for socialists? Socialists don't use it. Socialists, I have never heard a socialist use that term. Can we extrapolate and say a white savior is someone who uses capitalist ideals to solve racial or other social problems? I mean, maybe, Andrew, I would have to listen to the context, but like I said, like this is one of the things that conservative influencers have really confused people on. Conservative influencers have made it all about race and have convinced people that the left cares only and exclusively about race, but when we actually listen to what socialists are saying, in their own words, socialists don't use the term white savior. Socialists very rarely talk about race. What they talk about is the system. They talk about the system of racism. What is the system that perpetuates racism? Pop quiz for the chat. What is the system that perpetuates racism that socialists are always talking about? Because I mean, we can't extrapolate language that doesn't exist. Exactly. The system in systemic racism, which is what socialists are always referring to, is capitalism, private property ownership, capitalism. So, Andrew, I wish I could do this, but I can't extrapolate language that I haven't heard from the left. The right are the people who use this language. The left does not. If you want to provide me with a clip, I'll look at it for sure. But I do appreciate the super chat, though. All right. With that out of the way, let's do a couple other orders of business. Number one, if you are not yet subscribed to my Substack, Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com, please make sure you do so today. Now, I've got some exciting news. I have an exciting update. Tayton says 2S is at the beginning, their words, because 2S people were the first sex and gender minority in North America. Huh. Interesting, Tayton. Interesting. I appreciate that. So, guys, I have a little bit of a surprise. I have a little bit of an update. Do you guys remember this story from, yesterday? Yesterday, and there is an article on my Substack. There is also a video on my YouTube channel if you would prefer to hear me talk about this. Yesterday, I broke the story about the June Jordan School for Equity in the San Francisco School District. This is a publicly funded taxpayer school entirely built around equity and social justice. All right. And basically, what we found when we started digging into this school is we found that not only do their students not know how to read or do math, there is literally a 0% proficiency rate in math at the school. 0% of students know how to do math. 10% proficiency rate in English. So I guess that's something. 10% of the students at the school can read. 3% of them can do science. So not only did we find that academics at this school were just atrocious, which should surprise no one because it's a school for equity, we also found that the June Jordan School for Equity had publicly posted confidential student IEP data on the internet. We were able to actually go in and access student IEPs. Now, for those who don't know what an IEP is an individual education plan that is a document normally used in special education in order to put together a plan for what students need in order to be able to be successful in school. These documents are highly, 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 highly confidential. Even within school districts, not everyone has access to these documents. So we were more than a little surprised when we literally found Google Drives with the IEPs that we could access posted on their website and indexed in Google. This is a violation not only of California state law, one could argue this is a violation of the California state constitution, and one could also argue that this is a violation of FERPA. FERPA is a federal law around student privacy, and if you violate FERPA, you are in a metric ton of shit. So I reported that story yesterday. That came from me. If you see anyone else sharing that, that came from me in my community when we were sourcing data for my Unwoke wiki. And today, it looks as though, oh no, the June Jordan School for Equity has privated their entire website in response to my reporting. They took their entire website offline. So it's not like, it makes me wonder, quite frankly, what other documents did they have in the bowels of that website that we just hadn't found yet? What else are they hiding? It's a publicly funded school. It's within the San Francisco Unified School District. We can FOIA their asses. But for the moment, I'm more than a little bit pleased that we were able to get a public school to take their entire goddamn website offline just by doing a little bit of reporting and a little bit of sneaking through files and stuff like that. That is the type of stuff, guys, that you literally only get on my Substack. I'm one of the only people on the internet doing this type of independent journalism, this type of investigative reporting. These are stories that you don't hear covered anywhere else. So if you want to get access to this, please make sure you sign up on my Substack, Karlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. You can subscribe for free. You will get access to a bunch of free stories. But if you do want to support the work I'm doing and keep me in business, because I am 100% funded by you, now is a great time to become a supporter on my Substack. That's for $8 a month or $80 a year. There are other options to do more if you want to. But guys, right now, for the next month, I am doing a funding campaign for my next undercover adventure. I have a conference all picked out that I want to go to. Undercover, this is not a public event. There's no video, there's no live stream. The only way we're going to be able to find out what's going on at this conference and what comes next in terms of gender ideology, specifically in schools, is to be able to actually go undercover to the conferences where people are learning this stuff. I am the only person doing this consistently in the country that I know of. There might be other people, but I don't know of them. If people know of other people doing this consistently, please introduce me to them. I really do mean that. But As of right now, I am the only person that I know of in the country that is consistently going undercover at leftist events to record them, to report back to you in a nuanced way, not clickbait, not outrage porn, not any of that. I want to report back to you what's going on and show you the receipts so you can decide for yourself what you're comfortable with. There is a gender ideology and education conference a couple months from now. I want to go undercover to it. But I need your help in order to be able to do that, because this is going to cost about $3,000 to cover. I'm going to be completely transparent in this. That's roughly the cost for an average undercover thing for me, is roughly, give or take, around $3,000, because you have to pay for hotel, you have to pay for registration, you have to pay for travel, you got to pay for food, you have to pay for time off doing other work. And so that's roughly the cost. And so I am putting it out there to the community. I would really like to go to this conference. I think it's going to be very, very fruitful. Of course, I can't tell you what it is because that would be on the internet and that would ruin everything. That's not very undercover. But I can tell you that I do want to go. I do think it would be fruitful, and I'm asking for your help in getting me there. So the best way to do that is to head over to the Substack link that I just put in the chat. I'll put it in again, because Elena, I'm going to answer your question with that link. There are several ways you can make a donation. You can sign up for a founding membership for $240 a year. I need 13 people to do that to cover this conference. You can sign up for an annual membership for $80 a year. I need 38 people to do that to register for this conference. You can sign up for a monthly membership of $8 a month. If you stay subscribed for 3 months, I need 125 people to go and cover this conference. Chad, I offered that to the Groypers, and the Groypers said, we're not going to leftist events. Why are we going to leftist events? We get arrested. So no. The Groypers had their chance to do this sort of stuff. I told them I would even help them do it. They chickened out like a bunch of pussies. So no, I'll go do it for them. Don't worry. The woman will take care of it where the young men are failing. Okay? If you do want to make a one-time gift, you can do so. There's a link here for it. It goes directly to my website, which is activelyunwoke.com/support. You can make a one-time gift of support right here through Stripe, or there are some other options as well. But guys, here's the deal. I would love to do this conference. I hope that people are going to show up and fund this to the level that I need it to be funded in order to go. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who read my Substack every single day. This really shouldn't be a problem, okay? But I need $3,000 through a combination of all of those things in order to be able to have the resources to fund this undercover journalism, okay? And so I'm leaving it up to you guys. I'm leaving it up to universe. I'm leaving it up to fate. If you want me to go undercover and show you what's going on at a gender ideology conference, well, that would require there being contributions, Stony Baloney, because right now there aren't any. So if I put a goal tracker up right now, it'd be a big old hunkin' zero. That's reality. So I don't want to put a goal tracker with zero up. If you guys want me to go to this conference, then the funding is going to come from somewhere. And if the funding doesn't come from somewhere, it's no longer coming out of the bank of Carlin's savings account. So I'm happy to do it. I would love to do it. I love breaking down this information, but other people have to step up and want it. $8 a month, $80 a year. There are other options if you want to give more. I'm not asking people to do that because we should be able to grassroots fundraise for this. And we'll just see what happens, guys. You got 1 month to get it done. Or I just won't go undercover at the conference and I'll stay home and dick around on the internet. And that'll just have to be good enough for that. All right, so that's that. One last way you can support the work I'm doing is by heading over to the Unwoke Art store, which is unwokeart.com. Let me pop that link in the chat. And the special we have right now on unwokeart.com is the brand new Socialists Are Gay design. I wasn't originally going to make this a design in the Unwoke Art store, but by popular demand I have. And you can get this design on all the different merch that it's on for 25% off for the rest of the week up through Sunday. After that, it's going to go up to normal price. The discount is taken at the checkout, so you can add any of the socialist or gay design to your cart, and it will automatically be 25% off. And that deal is only good through this weekend. Got lots of other stuff in the store as well, including the limited edition Steamboat Willie Whiteness Means Capitalism shirt. That's only going to be in the store for a couple more weeks. Got lots of other stuff there as well. You can take a look around the Unwoke Art website, go up and see all the t-shirts we got. We got the Real Marxism shirt, the Be Bourgeois shirt, just like I'm wearing right now. Lots of great stuff there. And of course, all purchases do go to support the work I'm doing, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, guys, with that said, let's get into this here video, shall we? We are watching a video from 3 years ago, so let's keep that context in mind. 3 years ago, from Dr. Joan Donovan, then of Harvard University, now of Boston University, talking about right-wing extremism.
Hello and welcome. Today's event continues the conversation from our recent HILT conference on championing equitable instruction and inclusive classrooms. Our session is titled How to Talk About Far-Right Extremism and Disinformation in the Classroom. It can be increasingly difficult to talk about pressing social issues in the classroom, especially as political polarization, disinformation, and extremism take over public conversations. Students often rely on social media, particularly YouTube and TikTok, to form their opinions, which is why educators should be aware of the range of discussions happening on these contentious topics. Even knowing how to talk about social functions of conspiracies or media practices like news gathering and sourcing can help defuse difficult classroom situations. During our conversation, Dr. Joan Donovan will speak about her experiences teaching about media manipulation, white supremacist extremism, and disinformation, and provide some tips for addressing them. Dr. Joan Donovan is the research director of the Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. Joan leads the field in examining internet and technology studies, online extremism, media manipulation, and disinformation campaigns. She also leads the Technology and Social Change Project, or TASK, which explores how media manipulation is a means to control public conversation, derail democracy, and disrupt society. TASK conducts research, develops methods, and facilitates workshops for journalists, policymakers, technologists, and civil society organizations on how to detect, document, and debunk media manipulation campaigns. Dr. Donovan teaches a graduate-level course in media manipulation and disinformation campaigns with a focus on social movements, political parties, governments, corporations, and other network groups engage in active efforts to shape media narratives and disrupt social institutions. Her research can be found in a wide range of academic books and peer-reviewed journals, as well as such media outlets as NPR, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Rolling Stone, The Atlantic, and more. Prior to joining the Kennedy School, Joan was the research lead for Data and Society's Media Manipulation Initiative, where she led a large team of researchers studying efforts to manipulate socio-technical systems for political gain. Dr. Donovan received her PhD in Sociology and Science Studies from the University of California, San Diego, and was a postdoctoral fellow at the UCLA
All
Institute
bad
for Society
things
and
come out of
Genetics,
San Diego,
where she studied white supremacists' use of DNA ancestry tests, social movements, and technology. Without further
white
ado, let's begin our
supremacist
discussion
use
of
of
extremism
DNA
and
ancestry
disinformation.
tests.
Joan, the virtual floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's truly an experience to be able to talk about this with this group of folks. And please don't hesitate to put questions in the Q&A as we get rolling here. I'll try to keep an eye on it. So the shorter and more brief you can be, the easier it is for me to kind of incorporate it into what we're going to be talking about here. But there'll be plenty of room for questions after I roll through some of the material. And I'm going to share my screen here just because I've prepared some slides. I started at the Kennedy School thinking about research, doing a lot of research on white supremacist groups and media manipulation, disinformation campaigns. And the wonderful folks at the Kennedy School offered me an opportunity to teach a class, bringing in literature from sociology, communication studies, technology and philosophy, some data science, a heavy bit of research about journalism, but then also brought in some journalists themselves. And what I tried to do was set up a classroom environment of where people felt really comfortable discussing with one another the issues of the day. Of course, for the last several years, disinformation has become a very hot topic, as has the rise in extremism in the U.S.
I just want to say, I don't ever want to be told that I'm fat again. I'm not look shaming. I don't really care what she looks like. I'm just saying that I'm called fat every day on the internet, and I just really, I really think, like, yeah, like, I don't want to be a dick, but like, I do actually have a neck. I do. I'm just saying.
Especially white supremacist or white power groups. And that can be really difficult for younger folks to talk about without feeling as if they're being personally attacked just for asking questions. And so what I've tried to do is work within a set of guidelines and a set of materials that help move the classroom discussion along, but don't allow, any particular trope to take over. It can be particularly hard at the Kennedy School because everybody's got a political opinion. And so one of the things I try to establish early on is, well, what counts as evidence in the classroom isn't going to be the same thing that counts as evidence when you're hanging out with your friends. And so, the motto of trust but verify has been something that has led me out of some particularly prickly conversations, especially as students want to learn more about race and gender and culture, religion, and how that impacts politics and our political worldviews. As an educator, your role is to guide them through those questions and get them to not just rely on what they knew before they came into the classroom, but to actually learn something. And so for my students, I've really tried to cultivate an attitude about learning, which is that you don't come to the classroom already knowing everything you need to know about media manipulation, disinformation, and extremism. So I'll give you a few definitions of things that might help you in your classroom get beyond, partisan talking points and into the mechanics of understanding what's happening in our current moment as we've kind of been deluged by an abundance of lies.
Now, I just want to note a couple things. So because this presentation is 3 years old, we might actually get some really funny clips of Joan here saying things or disinformation that have since borne out to be non-disinformation. So let's just keep an eye on that. I don't normally like doing gotcha content, but like I'm going to make an exception for Joan because I really, 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 really dislike her because she's besmirching my alma mater where she currently works. And so if we can get Joan in like some good gotcha moments where she says something is clearly and obviously disinformation, but it's actually proven to be true because this was 3 years ago. Let's just make sure we clip that. I want everyone to keep me honest. You guys know things I don't sometimes, so let's keep an eye on that. Secondly, I will say that I know that we don't like to think that we can learn from these people. However, the ironclad law of woke projection dictates that Joan, by virtue of presenting about disinformation and right-wing extremism, is actually going to tell us some key truths about things that the left are doing, because the left always projects things that they're doing onto the right. And so let's just pay attention for that, because if she wants to say the quiet part out loud, that's totally fine. We can take advantage of it, but that's something I'm fully expecting her to do in the presentation.
Especially in our online environments. And I don't think it's necessarily even fair to tell students to just read the Washington Post or just read the New York Times. I think we actually have to cultivate media literacy and an approach to understanding news gathering and bias so that they realize.
Hang on. Maldi's asking a question. Does the left project on purpose? Well, to be really clear, everyone projects. Everyone projects. everyone on the left and the right and the center and the libertarians, you, me, your mom, your grandma, your best friend, everyone projects. Now, some people do it more than others, but I wouldn't say that projection is something that is exclusive to the left, because the right projects their bullshit all of the effing time. But because we know that she's going to be projecting, we can still take advantage of it.
That when we talk about politics, we're actually really talking about media about politics. Now, I know at the Kennedy School, a few of us probably related to politicians. And so you are a little bit more, as we would talk in technology studies, you're a little close, you're close to the metal. That is, you're in it. But for most of us, we glean our information about politics based on a kind of bricolage or a mosaic of media sources that we put together. And then, it kind of feels like true, or, counts as true if we've been able to see the same information a few different places at a few different outlets and then verify it, of course. However, with social media, it also introduces a lot of confusion because repetition is part of the design. And therefore, it can actually be disarming for many of our students who will say, well, I saw it on Facebook, I saw it on TikTok, I saw it here, there, and everywhere. And you have to kind of help them understand what's at stake there. I'm getting a few questions about unbiased news organizations. That's a rabbit hole that you should talk with your students through. I take it on a story by story basis, which is I try to get the students to understand, well, how long has passed since this story came out? We're always going to know more the longer a story is in play. And so if it's in a breaking news situation and you can show them, hey, we're only 4 hours out of learning this information, it's going to be a while before we know something more true. And so those are the kinds of ways in which I try to get them to think about news as a process. But there is, every news organization does exhibit some kind of political bias or bias related to the kinds of topics they tend to cover. And that has a lot to do with who they hire and who works there and who's on what beat. And so those dynamics, though, are things that you can understand. And resources, I always go to Pointer when I need information about different news outlets or information about the kind of like goings on of journalism. Poynter is how it's spelled. So Donovan's law of disinformation. This is a joke, but it's kind of true still, which is there's no communication without misinformation. So that is an important thing to understand in our classrooms, specifically because we don't want students to show up and feel wrong because they're asking questions about things that we assume are misinformation, or we don't want to approach it to suggest that they're misinformed. What we actually want to do is recognize that in every question, there is inquisitiveness. And so we want to dig a little bit deeper. Sometimes students will not approach it with a question. So sometimes I will just reorient them and say, can you phrase that in the form of a question? Because sometimes they want to get a point across. And so there are ways in which we can disarm how they're going to talk about misinformation by just setting some ground rules around what it is they're trying to get at, and why specifically in moments of heavy news, like what we went through with the, for instance, the rise of white supremacist groups and the violence at the Capitol, people want explanations, and students are taking in a ton of media to try to understand it.
Literally just started. So
their media,
I don't know.
And the media that other people consume are going to be very different. There was a great article in the Markup showing just differences in red feeds and blue feeds on Facebook during the Capitol insurrection, and how
in
red feeds there was this one very false story claiming that facial recognition had identified Antifa at the Capitol, and therefore you should, the reader should not assume that these are Trump supporters storming the Capitol. That lie was later repeated by Rep. Matt Gaetz on the floor of Congress later when they were certifying the votes. And then the company that was named in the fake news article had to get the article's author to issue a retraction. Someone's asking, what does red feed and blue feed mean? So your news feeds on Facebook, you can, we all have our own partisan likes and dislikes. But what the markup was able to do as a journalism outfit was set up an account that really was a sort of a heavy Democrat feed, which is the blue feed, and then the red feed was one that was more conservative news based. But you could see in the media environments the actual definition of what was happening in real time was being shaped differently for different audiences. And I want you to understand that that is an effect of the personalization that we experience by using social media to get news and information. Great question. So a few definitions. When we talk about media manipulation, we use a very broad category of media to talk about.
Yeah, so Bot is saying in the chat she got fired from Harvard. She did. So again, this presentation was 3 years ago. Like within the last couple of months, she got fired from Harvard in some big scandal, and she made a big media thing about it. And I was gonna look into it at one point because I was going through my drama phase at that point. I was like, I'm kind of interested to find out why she got fired from Harvard, because she's like a really infamous leftist. And but like I never actually looked into it. But now she's at Boston University instead. And that's why I'm bitter and pissed off about this.
About an artifact of communication. So it could be notes from a meeting. It could be a book. It could be a movie. It could be a post you see online. It could be a meme. It could be a documentary. It could be AM radio. Anything that is the leave behinds of communication. We talk about as media. And then when we talk about manipulation, though, we talk about to change by artful or unfair means so as to serve one's purpose. And we leave the word artful in there because artists and activists and others for years have used media manipulation as a tactic to unveil something dangerous or troublesome about our world. So hoaxing the media in particular, or hoaxing mainstream news organizations is a familiar tactic that actually I wrote about in Scientific American as coming from activists on the left who knew that anybody could register a domain online. And so in the 90s, there were these activists called the Yes Men that decided, well, we could just pretend to be the World Trade Organization. Nobody's stopping us from buying this domain. We could pretend to be George W. Bush's website. And that's, ways in which media manipulators think about leveraging the design features of our open internet in order to hoax or produce news or to trick or deceive audiences is really something that over the last 20 years has come into fashion in a way that is, at this point, it's incredibly problematic and is, maybe a meme war will take down the government. Who knows? But it certainly is, a serious problem when our open communication infrastructure is being used by media manipulators to disinform at scale. And so I wouldn't fault students or any of us for getting it wrong at this stage, because there are actually very few guardrails that ensure the information that we're getting through search and social media is true and correct. In fact, the information environment is tilted to the advantage of media manipulators who often will use techniques like spoofing. That is, they'll pretend to be someone that they're not, or they'll use fake accounts in order to make you believe that they're the New York Times or the AP. And so students sometimes won't be able to assess those cloaked websites or those cloaked accounts as easily as we might hope. And journalists too are often tricked into amplifying misinformation without any, unwittingly. Even when they've tried to vet it and check it, sometimes the problem is that good. We're getting into this question about misinformation and disinformation now. So misinformation is just the sharing of false information, very big, broad buckets. Disinformation, though, is the creation and distribution of intentionally false information for political ends. And why that matters is because what we try to do as a research team is be able to assess, and you can go to our website, mediamanipulation.org, to see the kind of research that we do. It's completely open access and available for everyone. I have a very high commitment these days to making sure public knowledge about this field of disinformation is available across all professional sectors, which is exactly why I wanted to do this VPAL event, because I think it's important that we all understand what's happening here. And so when we're thinking about disinformation, though, what we're trying to do is assess, where does the information come from? And is it part of some kind of network of, in some cases, white supremacists, some cases, political operatives, some cases, foreign operatives. That's why you hear Russia so much in the press. Is this information kind of being forced into our public conversation? And if so, can we figure out how, right? So that's what we do as a research team, is try to understand media manipulation, disinformation. But if you know a little bit about how that works, you can be a little bit more of a savvy media consumer. And at the end, I'll give you a list of journalists that you should follow. And if you just follow these few key journalists, you'll kind of be up to date day by day about what's happening on the dystopia beat, as we call it. But when we're talking about online extremism, I think this is really important to understand, because your students are not necessarily going to understand the things that are like something racist happened on the internet versus actual organized white power movements. And so they're going to oscillate in their understanding of what's happening, because they're not going to really be able to figure out, well, what's the difference between, a college frat that throws a party where people show up in blackface.
So guys, I just want to know, we're about 18 minutes into this presentation. I don't pre-watch the presentation, so I don't know what we're getting into. We discover these things together. And what we've discovered about Joan is that Joan uses an awful lot of words to say nothing. And so if I'm not doing commentary on it, it's because she's literally giving me nothing to react to right now. And so we're going to keep watching, and hopefully she will give us something to react to. I'm pretty sure she will. I just want to note, that's why I'm being quiet, is she's not saying anything. She's just saying the same thing over and over and over again using different words.
That happens every year at many different universities. Nevertheless, it's a kind of moment in which people learn about other cultures, or conversations that we have about appropriate Halloween costumes and how it's not a good idea in any way to culturally appropriate the signs and symbols of other cultures, especially ones that are used.
She means you can't dress as an Indian
important ceremonies or rituals in order to
Halloween
make a joke. So
yeah,
but when we're talking about online extremism, we're not really talking about that kind of stuff. What we're talking about is a repeated pattern of behavior.
All Halloween
where the user or group uses websites and social media to spread a worldview of white supremacy and intolerance. So what this could look like is a website that is maintained. For instance, the Proud Boys used to have a pretty unique website for a while that sold racist T-shirts Some of them more abhorrent than the last. Some were hard to figure out. The ones that said RWDS, not many people understood what that meant. It meant right-wing death squad.
That's not racist.
We saw pictures of people at the Capitol with the T-shirt that just said hashtag 6W or 6MWE, which means 6 million were not enough.
That's not so cool,
right?
man.
And so that's an anti-Semitic nod to the Holocaust.
Don't wear that.
And shit. So this is a good question about talking about extremism without necessarily legitimizing what these groups stand for. I think it's important that we all have a similar kind of knowledge about what is at stake when we try to talk about the left and the right in any kind of balanced way, especially when we're talking about right-wing, I like to call it online extremism or far-right extremism, but there's no denying that what happened at the Capitol had a kind of post-apocalyptic feel to it because of the influence of Christian white nationalism. And there was a great article written in the New York Times about this, where people really did believe this was the end of days and that Judgment Day was upon them and that they should bring this, gallows noose to the Capitol. And literally people wanted to hang Mike Pence. So when we're talking about in a classroom, it's really important not to deflect and turn away from what's actually happening in the news and what the questions they have are, and try to set up some kind of false equivalence between anti-fascist organizing, which can be violent and it can be insurrectionary.
Well, at least she admits that.
But at the same time, you don't want to confuse the two. Especially in this moment where the reason why we had such a growing white nationalist movement over the last 4 years had a lot to do with the political environment in which they felt like they were winning. And, you look at policies around, for instance, if you look at policies around the Muslim ban, or immigration policies about the border wall or the build the wall chants that were very frequent at Trump rallies. It's just really important to understand those dynamics. People are asking why to call out the definition of extremism for white supremacy. It's really important to understand that this online extremism argument that I'm making is very particular to the far right. When it comes to other forms of extremism, they don't have this same kind of high touch social media presence as other groups.
Really? Really, Joan? Really? You're telling me the far left doesn't have a social media presence? Because on the Unwoke wiki that we're building out, we literally have social media links for like every single effing entry in the wiki. Like, you're going to tell me there isn't a vast number of literal Antifa accounts on Twitter that use Twitter for organizing? It's only the far right that uses Twitter to like post memes and stuff. The far left doesn't use it at all. Bullshit, Joan.
Anti-fascist organizers often will meet in person. And they will have local chapters, and they don't use the internet in the same way to spread ideas and to do recruitment. However, there are more fascist podcasts than there are.
I literally spend between 12 and 16 hours a day tracking down left-wing bullshit online every day for the past 3 years, Joan. Don't tell me these people aren't organizing and spreading information online. Jesus Christ, these people.
Hours in the day. There's more content put online by folks that for a while were calling themselves the alt-right, but have now splintered into a bunch of different factions. And so I am calling attention to that specific mode of engagement on social media, especially as it materialized over the last few months in Stop the Steal rallies, that the ones that were not as well documented as the Capitol siege.
Exactly, Tatum.
But talking about events on particularly December 12th that happened in DC, where the Proud Boys...
Listen. This is not a good argument. You want a fascist podcast? Go on to Odyssey. Go on to BitChute. They're very easy to find. I promise you. This argument, this is Stony Baloney. Come on. You need to be better than this. This is an argument that conservatives make when they want to deflect responsibility from their own side. They go, I've never heard of a white supremacist. I've never heard of a far-right podcast. Bullshit, bro. These things do exist. There is absolutely a white identitarian, white well-being, white power bullshit that's going on right now. They're on fucking Odyssey. Some of them are on YouTube. Some of them are on Rumble. I can point you to them. I'm not going to, because I'm not going to name them on the internet, but I can very easily point you to them. So can we please be better than this bitch? Conservatives, when you are denying that there are bad apples on your side, you are no better than people like her who claim there are no bad apples on the left. You have your bad apples too. And it's like, it's just unbecoming to pretend that doesn't exist. No, the alt-right is real. These things are real. They do exist. I know, because they've doxed me and harassed me to within an inch of my fucking sanity. So these things are not just figments of the left's imagination. They absolutely do exist. And every single time it's deflected on the right, it's just like, what the fuck are we even doing? Does anyone care about truth? Anyone? Yeah, well, when you haven't looked for something, it's very easy not to find it. I have looked for these things. I spent months going through their stuff in 2021. Yeah, I'll make a t-shirt. Be better than this leftist bitch. Exactly.
Boys stole Black Lives Matter banners and then burned them on live stream. And if you were in that moment watching those live streams, there were tens of thousands of people watching this happen. And there was lots of references to...
Hang on. The far right, this is, guys, stop with the bullshit. Stop with the deflecting. Just stop. Akshay, you know better than this. It is true that the far right has been banned off of many social media platforms and are now in the bowels of the internet, but that's because they've been banned off those social media platforms. There are also, if you listen to the left, which we are supposed to do on this channel, if you listen to the left, they will tell you that they are also banned and also in the bowels of the internet. So it's true for both sides. I'm so sick of hearing, well, the right gets banned on everything, so they don't exist. No, they do exist. Just because they get banned on things doesn't mean they don't exist. They do exist. There are platforms that host them. It's not that hard to find them. And a lot of them are still on fucking Twitter to this day. A lot of them are still on fucking YouTube to this day. So don't tell me, I just can't find them. I don't know where to look. Well, you aren't looking very hard then, because it's really not that hard to find them. Jesus Christ. Be better than this bitch. Be better than them. Conservatives, if you're not going to be better than the left, then why should any of us even bother with you? No, Milo. Odyssey is the corner of the internet they all got ostracized to. Gab is the corner of the internet. Rumble is now the corner of the internet. And as I keep saying painstakingly over and over and over and over and over again, some of them are on YouTube to this day. Some of them are on Twitter to this day. And I'm not answering any more questions about this. Oh, Cece, go fuck yourself. Guys, this is a good time to remember the rules of my chat. The rules of my chat are this. Rule number 1, don't be a dick. I can do whatever I want because you are in my house right now. I will say whatever I want. I will do whatever I want. You can have whatever feelings about that you want, but you will not insult me. You will not insult other people in my audience. Number 2, no fucking whining. No fucking whining. Cece, if you don't care enough to know what's going on in the world, more than you care about vulgarity and blasphemy, clutch my pearls. Oh no! You can get the fuck off my channel. And I'm going to ban you after this just to make sure you don't accidentally come back. We are doing important shit on this channel. We are actually listening to stuff no one else on the internet is listening to. We're going into places no one else on the internet is going. And if you don't want to be here because of your fragile fucking conservative fucking sensibilities, where you're like, you said goddamn, oh my word, that usurps everything. I simply cannot hear that fucking vulgarity. Go somewhere else. Go to fucking church. But you're not going to be useful here, and you obviously aren't smart enough to keep up with what's going on anyway. And now that I have properly berated you in my chat, I am banning you for breaking the rules and pissing me off and being disruptive and fucking whining. Go away. Jesus Christ. Conservatives getting bent out of fucking shape over swearing. As if they aren't going to swear in the Marxist utopia. You know what, guys? Like, do you guys know that conservatives, do you understand that queer people make a point of swearing in professional presentations as a rebellion against the system? Do you guys know they make a point of it? They do it on purpose just to piss you off? Do you think you're not going to have swearing in the Marxist utopia? Choose one. Carlin swearing and blaspheming, or descending into a Marxist utopia, because ain't no one else on the internet doing the type of content I'm doing. So you get kicked out of here, you ain't got nowhere else to go. God damn. All right. From now on, I want no more deflection about whether or not there are alt-right groups on the internet. If you don't believe that there are, you can go onto the websites that I have previously mentioned, which include Gab, which include Odyssey, which include Rumble, which include BitChute, which include Telegram, which include Twitter and fucking YouTube, because they're still on there. And you can do your own research about those groups. I am not here to do your research for you. I did this research in 2021. If you want to find the research I did 3 years ago, you can go over to my Substack, which is carlin.substack.com, and you can fucking look for it. It was back in 2021. It was called The Backlash to Critical Race Theory is Here. Just search for it. It'll come right up. That'll be your starting point for all your alt-right groups that exist on the internet, at least the ones I cared about in 2021. And you can do your own research and find it your damn self. I don't want to hear anything more about it. And I don't want to hear anything more about complaining or fucking whining. We are watching this, and that's what we're going to do.
The KKK and that imagery of violence. And so that's why I make those distinctions, and that's why our research focuses on online extremism as it relates to the U.S. far right. But there's other great research out there that can help you understand other kinds of fundamentalism and the role the internet plays in spreading worldviews. I don't talk so much about recruitment either, because it's not the case that, except for a group like the Proud Boys, it's not the case that people do like have a direct entry point into a radicalized group, but rather it's more in the air, and it's attitudes that people adopt. And disinformation is actually a very potent vector by which students are introduced to far-right extremism online. I hope I satisfied. We can get into self-care later, but I get 2 therapists. It's all good. Another thing you should be attentive to, though, is network conspiracy. This is something that we've been doing research on related to. Rob Ferris has written a book called Networked Propaganda. He's on my team. And Brian Friedberg has written a few explainers on QAnon, one specifically for Wired that is fantastic. But networked conspiracies are sort of like urban legends. I mean, we don't always know how we know about certain kinds of urban legends, but their network conspiracies provide moral tales that explain confusing events. And one of the ways to think about networked conspiracies is really about how do you think about social media, which is to say that they tend to go viral. And depending upon who the influencers are that are bringing these conspiracy theories around the web and through different social media, they have two incentives usually. One is financial. That is, if you can sell t-shirts, or you can get donations, or you can get people to subscribe to your podcast or your Patreon, it can make money. So QAnon is an industry.
That was true.
As well, political gains, right? If you are...
I was thinking today, or maybe I was thinking about this last night when I was in one of my depressive states. I was like, maybe just for a month, just for 1 month, I should just tweet like a conservative influencer and just see what happens. Let's see how much merch I sell when I say Trump is the obvious choice and Joe Biden is a pedophile and what other conservative keywords can I say to like get me followers on Twitter, because of course that is our number one mission in life, right? Is to have all the followers on Twitter. I just need to say Patriots, we're winning. Post pictures of genderqueer all the time. Post I could do screenshots from all those Amaze videos talking about sex and just post that, like, can you believe they're teaching our children this garbage? I could start tweeting like a Christian. I could start being like, God bless everyone, pray, etc. I don't know what Christians tweet these days. I could tweet this every once in a while. 2020 was stolen, but we're winning now. We're winning. Trump for king. Maybe I should just try it and see how it goes. And everyone's going to be really confused. Maybe I can just like try to make everyone think I'm a Christian. Yeah, I could call everyone a groomer. Yep. Even people that are, obviously not groomers. Yeah, I could do lots. I think I could do it. I think I could pull it off. I think I could, I'll do like the next, because okay, so conservatives believed me when I said I left the Democratic Party, which was true. I did actually leave the Democratic Party. But like when I was like, I don't want to be a Republican, I want to be a libertarian, they got all pissed off and they thought I was grifting. I wasn't apparently grifting when I left from Democrat to Republican, but they all thought I was grifting when I became a libertarian. So maybe the next step of my evolution, which would absolutely not be true, but we could probably make them believe it's true, is if I became a Christian. What if I became a conservative Christian? That would really like, if I just started tweeting, I'd be like, guys, I found Jesus. I know many of you have been praying for me for years, and you've been praying for my salvation. And I found Jesus, and the clouds opened up, and the sun shone down from the sky, and I heard the faint tones of the Hallelujah choir, and I welcomed Jesus into my life, and I could have like a whole baptism ceremony or something, and I could be like, I'm getting baptized in the name of our Lord. The point is, I wonder how many more t-shirts I would sell from my Unwoke art store if I just became a born-again Christian. Like, not really, because I would never lower myself to become a Christian, but like, if I just became a born-again Christian on Twitter, how many people do you think would actually look into it and find this kind of midstream rant where I'm talking about how I'm going to totally grift on them just to prove a fucking point? This is a good point, Elena. I would actually have to stop swearing for a little while. That might be too high of a price to pay. I'm pretty used to swearing, but I think I could probably do it. Allotrope, I can neither confirm nor deny. Anyway, let's continue.
Are able to advance your political.
Yeah, this is the attitude that the sunglasses look brings out. This is the new me. This is what I'm streaming in from now on. This is going to be called the Ted Kaczynski look, and it's all I'm wearing on stream from now on. And this is the new attitude. So everyone just better get used to it.
Cause based on whatever the breaking news of the day is, you think about the news differently. You actually think about breaking news as an opportunity to piggyback your ideas into mainstream conversation. We saw this very clearly with the QAnon groups that tried to piggyback their idea about the Democrats. God, this is going to sound crazy to say out loud, but Q stands for Q clearance, and it's a military designation. And Anon is was this.
You know what I should do? Okay, I swear this is the last time I'm going to interrupt with an idea that's not about this presentation, but this just happens on stream sometime. You know what I should do? I should take a picture. Actually, I already have a picture of myself in this outfit. And I should take a picture of myself in this outfit and put it through AI art and make it be like a sketch of me, like the Unabomber sketch. I'm gonna make a sketch of myself wearing this outfit, but it's gonna be drawn Unabomber style. I'm gonna put on a t-shirt. I'm putting that shit on a t-shirt. I have a PhD. I swear to God, I totally have a PhD. I'm gonna work on that later, though. Yeah, we'll do a whole, we'll do an FBI Most Wanted poster with me drawn as the Unabomber sketch. That'll be great.
QAnon was a screen name on an anonymous message board where there were a whole bunch of different accounts. FBI Anon, White House Confidential. There were a bunch of different people using anonymous message boards to pretend that they were leaking information to the populace. And so QAnon, though, became this phenomenon in this hashtag where people could make money by basically looking at this anonymous message board, taking some screenshots, and then reposting those screenshots either on their Twitter feed or talking about them in their podcasts or making a YouTube video or putting them into a Facebook group or a Reddit discussion. And then they kind of became known as these oracles or these explainers. And where QAnon really takes off as a network conspiracy is during the Epstein
seriously?
Scandal.
Hang on. I was actually looked at as a possible Unabomber? Seriously? Tell us that story, bro. That's a unique story. I hope you're not just making that up.
This trope around Epstein didn't kill himself, this meme that you've probably seen at some point or heard repeated somewhere. That's part of this whole phenomenon we call meme wars, which is meme wars bring ordinary people into contact with disinformation in the form of network conspiracies.
Wait, she's actually saying that she thinks Jeffrey Epstein killed himself? Really, Joan? Really? You teach at Harvard? Really? That's just meme war propaganda. Jeffrey Epstein killed himself.
So QAnon, Plandemic is another one you may have seen. Biden crime family. That was the one they were trying to make happen during the leaking of the Hunter Biden laptop fiasco, which was so many moons ago, just back in October. And then, of course, Stop the Steal.
Oh, the Hunter Biden laptop that has since proven to be completely accurate and was completely newsworthy, and the media covered it up in order to steal an election. That Hunter Biden laptop, Joan? That one?
Which was the animating hashtag that brought together a bunch of different factions to claim that the election had been stolen from Trump by, there were so many different reasons out there. My favorite, though, was communist algorithms, that Venezuela had done it. But that's all to say that these mechanisms are now in play because of our social media information environment. So I just want to give you a couple of guides, and then we will go into Q&A. But here are some quick points that I think you can use as you're teaching or trying to manage discussions or facilitate conversations that are going to be difficult to have around hate speech and disinformation. One, misinformation is everybody's problem now. It's not easy to bracket it out of the conversation, even if you're teaching a math class. Students are curious, and the classroom should be a very safe environment for them to proffer questions. But of course, if they are trolling you, or if they have that glint in their eye, like I'm about to get you, just, you can deflect if you say, well, how is this related to the course material? That's one of my favorites is this related to the topic of discussion today? And so it's not necessarily dismissive. It just makes them work for it when it comes to trying to get explanation or trying to offer up some kind of, I don't know. I've had my share of students try to troll me. It's not an easy situation to navigate. Establish boundaries and standards at the beginning of the course that acknowledge the difficulties in knowing what is true, right? Education is an experience. Education is a struggle. And so I talk to my students about the nature of truth very early on, knowing that truth is contextual, truth is built on, brick by brick. We build the foundation of truth. And so truths that arrive out of nowhere, that don't seem to have basis in what we knew as true the day before, I encourage them to investigate and think more deeply about what they're accepting as truth. All media outlets have a bias, which is why it's important to know how to look at the content of a story and assess its reliability. Talk with students about what counts as evidence in the classroom. So I take it on a story-by-story basis. Of course, certain news outlets have a good reputation, some don't. But most students are not getting their information from reputable news sources. They're getting their information from social media. And so I think it's important that we just encourage them to trust but verify. Social media makes it hard to know the source of information. So I explained that very early on, that if you're getting your information from Snapchat, for instance, you're going to have to figure out another way to verify and vet it, what it is that you want to talk about.
Why in the holy hell are students at Harvard getting their information from Snapchat and TikTok? Like, that's the first question everyone should be asking. Why are Snapchat and TikTok considered to be reliable sources of information by Harvard students?
If students want to reference something on a platform like Twitter or TikTok or Wikipedia, they should also try to confirm that information in other ways. Of course, media outlets do get scoops, but I try to explain to students that journalism is not research in the same way that research in academia.
True.
It takes a much more measured tone and a lot more time, right? And so journalists, I often describe as the first draft of history. And with every first draft, there's going to be some problematic points of contention.
That's
as well. Talking about hate speech is very difficult, and under no circumstance should anyone use a slur to prove a point. That creates an environment of fear, defensiveness, and confusion, but also of permission, right? And so I do not allow students to use slurs in the classroom. Even things that sometimes I don't feel super comfortable saying on Zoom. We might use code words. It actually helps, like
what?
In their mind sometimes, like when we were discussing Pizzagate and QAnon in my classroom, with Pizzagate, there was this scandal that every time Podesta and Clinton were ordering pizza, what they were actually ordering was child pornography. And so we would just say,
they were paying a lot of money
pizza.
for that pizza.
Like, let's talk about cheese pizza.
They were paying a lot of money for
and
it.
So there are ways in which you can try to soften and lessen the hurt and pain that could be caused by trying to prove a point by saying a slur out loud. I'll tell you, these students can run circles around you with slurs that they know about. And so our job as educators is really to just set the tone and the guidelines and respect that we do not want to set up a culture of permission just because we want students to feel more free in a very, free as in, the context of speech. Which is to say that you want to emphasize that free speech is never free from consequences. And I think that that's been something that's really been
Indeed.
difficult in the classroom for us to discuss, and I'm happy to get into it. But students need to know that, these are not, this classmates are their colleagues, and colleagues can be pretty brutal. And so we can't actually control what people say about you outside of the classroom if you engage in this kind of behavior. And so that to me is an important thing that students can learn about dignity and respect as they're navigating how to talk about racism, hate speech, the far right, and disinformation in classroom environments. I also stress that when discussing matters of fact and misinformation, it's not an attack on personal identity. And so I might give a preamble in a lecture to say, well, we're going to get into this today. And this is why it matters for the literature. And that the classroom should actually be the place you want to be wrong. It should be the place that you want to stretch your ideas, and you should foster working through issues using course materials as a guide. Talking to them about, well, how does this author talk about hate speech? How does this author talk about disinformation? How do they convince you that they're right? Right. And so getting them to understand the mechanics and the
sad thing is here is my assessment of Joan as of right this second. We got about 20 minutes left of this presentation, so we'll see where it goes. I think Joan's a useful idiot. I do not think Joan is a hardcore leftist activist. I don't think she's a socialist. I think she's a progressive. I think she's a progressive, useful idiot. Why do I say that? Pop quiz for the chat. Why 36 minutes into this presentation am I identifying that Joan is a progressive, useful idiot for the left? She's not an activist. She's not a true believer. She's a useful idiot. Why do I think that? Definitely not a socialist. Definitely not. She does not speak socialist. She's not speaking in socialist. She's not using the language. She has not discussed collective. She's a plain Jane, CNN, New York Times, and this is important that we're able to identify this. There's no coded language. Exactly. No coded language. So the language always gives it away, guys. This is why I really recommend everyone become fluent in socialist. I will be giving a presentation on January 24th. You can find the link on my Substack, carlin.substack.com, in which it's a private training to teach you how to speak socialist, give you a crash course. Of course, the best way to learn how to speak socialist is to come to Socialism Saturdays on Saturday at 6 p.m. You can also come to my daily streams where we do some socialism, but tends to be a lot less and less hardcore than the Saturday ones, because the very best way to learn how to speak socialist is to immerse yourself in it. But when you immerse yourself in it and you become fluent in the language of socialist, it's very easy for you to identify that people like her are not socialists. They're not. Socialists speak a completely different language. So Gary, getting hired by Harvard is not proof that you're a socialist. This is going to be your typical conservative right here. No. We know socialists because socialists speak encoded language. They use English words, but they don't use the same definitions we have of them. They use the same vocabulary, not the same dictionary. Once you learn how to speak socialist, you will be able to easily identify this. If you haven't yet learned how to speak socialist, then that's something you want to work on. No, she's not. Nope. She is a progressive, useful idiot. And conservatives, it does not serve you to do this. It does not serve you guys to label everyone that you don't like as a communist and a socialist, because there are real communist and socialist groups that are doing really bad things. And when you call everyone you don't like a commie and a socialist, you obfuscate what is actually going on and you make the terms meaningless.
The facilitation of an argument in a academic paper doesn't just make them stronger scholars, it makes them stronger communicators. So I often have students grapple with the way that an author has had to deal with this as they're trying to tread the line between matters of fact and matters of misinformation. And then lastly, and this is something that I would say often in my class, is devil doesn't need an advocate. So everyone must ask questions authentically, that myself included. The point isn't to sit around and pretend that we're a bunch of liberals and that we're, woke and shook by all of these problems. The point isn't to pretend.
Nope. This is not how this works. You don't get to set the rules for this. You don't get to try to rationalize this in the land of conservative where you're like, she's not speaking the language, but I can tell from the look in her eye what she really means. No, that's retarded. If she was actually a socialist, she would be speaking socialist. She's not a socialist, which is why she's not speaking socialist. You don't get to say, I don't like the look in her eye or the way she turned her head, and that means she's a communist. That's retarded.
That we're some conservative or libertarian with some major bone to pick. So
Kimba's
with
now getting timeout in the chat.
With the government.
The reason Kimba just got a timeout in the chat is Kimba obviously doesn't want to listen. If Kimba comes back after their timeout and continues to spew bullshit in the chat when they've been corrected by everyone here, they're just going to be banned because we're going to assume that they're not smart enough to be here.
Those are exercises and those can be staged and you can do them effectively if you ask students to come to you with their authentic selves, right? And help them understand that there are going to be different biases that are going to shape their points of view, and that addressing those biases are more important than pretending they don't exist or that you are somehow above the fray, because we all get caught up in it. I often get caught up in, you could pretty much tell me anything about Bitcoin at this stage and I'll believe it, because I don't know how to deal with like that kind of conversation, the kind of misinformation about the currency over there, right? So I'm like, I know where my, particular spots are that I'm not going to know.
That's why I appreciate
what's happening, and so I have to
you may have our disagreements, but I appreciate
topics with a degree of both curiosity but also understanding. And then lastly, I'll just say, I'll put these in the chat as well. These reporters I have here, Taylor Lorenz at the New York Times.
God, look at the top reporter that Joan wants everyone to follow. Taylor Lorenz. Seriously, Joan? Seriously? Taylor Lorenz is your top reporter for people to follow? And then BuzzFeed people. BuzzFeed, of course, doesn't even exist anymore as a news outlet. Wow. Taylor Lorenz. Taylor Lorenz is the first and actually only person that I've blocked on Substack Notes and on Threads. I don't even use Threads anymore. Like I used it for like a day and a half. But like one of the things I did was I blocked Taylor Lorenz. Blocked Taylor Lorenz on everything.
Times is known as being on the meme beat. So she can help you understand Wall Street bets and meme stocks and what the heck happened to GameStop last week.
Bankrupt.
Ben Collins at NBC is an expert in QAnon and other kinds of network conspiracies. He's often on television these days, but if you follow his Twitter and his articles, you can really learn a lot. Brandy Zadrozny is a fellow reporter at NBC with Ben. She's more on the medical misinformation beat. And so her stories will help you understand what students might be coming into contact with related to medical misinformation. Craig Silverman and Jane Levchenko at BuzzFeed both are all-star reporters that do nearly daily updates on disinformation, what's out there, and who's and how different topics are being deceived or misrepresented online. They have some excellent journalism about the U.S. as well, even though they're both stationed at BuzzFeed Canada. And then at Wired, Emma Gray Ellis.
Hang on. Super chat from Rottweiler. Thank you, Rottweiler. A reliable method of separating useful dummies from true believers is the way they use queer. That would be a good litmus test. Generally speaking, yes, but progressives will still use the term queer too. We always have to look for it in context when progressives are using it. We have to identify if they know whether or not, if someone knows that the goal is to abolish the gender binary, then they're a true believer. Progressives generally don't know that the goal is to abolish gender entirely. They think it's just about making the world fair and safe for trans people.
Also has some really great stories to help you understand more about some of the social media platforms that are not necessarily the big ones like Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. But I encourage you to follow these reporters because they can help you get up to speed very quickly around what people are seeing online and what's gaining traction. Because I think the question that someone asked earlier about just being in this environment, I would hate to suggest that anybody just go out into the wilds and try to look at misinformation or it's gross out there. I'll tell you, if you run into misinformation, you also run into anti-Semitism, misogyny.
I wonder what Joan's position on Hamas is.
Like straight up ludicrous stuff, like videos of torture, self-harm. This stuff is not for the it just doesn't make for a good time online. So
you kind of need to look for torture porn on the internet though. Like, torture porn is not just going to show up in your feed unless you're actively searching for it. I guess my question is, what the fuck is Joan searching for? Like, what is she searching for that all of a sudden she's just got a video in her feed of someone being tortured? Because I've never had that happen. The worst that's ever happened to me is like I see a video of like something going on in Palestine where someone's gotten an arm blown off or something like that, or those horrible videos that like the awful conservatives make about like what it looks like right after someone has like gender affirmation surgery, where they have like the big chunk cut out of their arm and like all this stuff, or like I see stuff like that, but I don't see just like random torture porn. Yeah, like what are you searching for, Joan?
What I would suggest is if you follow these reporters, you're going to get a good understanding of what's out there without actually having to get into the mess of it. So I want to say thank you, and I'm going to stop my share here, and then
Q&A. Come on, Q&A.
We can get into some of these questions.
Good.
Joan, thanks very much. And I'll just, speaking on behalf of VPAL, I'll just frame some of these questions for you because we're pulling a lot of different themes. Maybe the first one we're seeing, and again, please use the Q&A to contribute your questions. Let's think about a couple of different takes on the teaching question. One, if you're teaching about these issues, specifically about these movements. So how do we frame and structure discussions about far-right movements and their ideas without legitimizing what they stand for? I mean, if we create a classroom which everything is open, does that mean that nothing gets any judgment, that everything is considered to be of equal importance and equal value?
It's a good question. I try to really calibrate based on the theme of the conversation of the day to make sure that we're facilitating a discussion that is leading to the whole classroom being able to engage with it. I've had some experiences where certain students were pretty far down the rabbit hole when it comes to certain YouTube influencers, and really had trouble discussing anything else. They were always trying to give me a particular point of view, which other students gave me the feedback that they found his comments to be distracting. And so as a professor, you have to intervene. And so I just, I said, hey, stay for a minute after class. And I was just like, I get it, but also like, this isn't the turf to have that conversation. And I'm happy to meet you in office hours and go back and forth. But everybody has to learn. And so, listening to student feedback and also getting an understanding of, what's at stake if you do decide to ignore a student. You never want to get into a position where you're shaming a student for bringing something up, or into a position where you're trying to juggle too many things that you don't really know a lot about, especially when it comes to, things that can be as intricate and weird as QAnon or meme war. What you really want to do is raise the level of the conversation into a place where everyone can participate and that the discussion has some academic and scholarship value. So sometimes if someone's referencing something that's, kind of deep in the weeds on the internet, I'll say, I don't know what it is. I just don't know what it is. Like, I don't know how to talk about it. Or I'll say, if I do know what it is, I may explain to the class what it is and then say, while this is interesting, I want to go in a different direction. But it's difficult conversation to have, especially around race in this moment. We do this whole set of classes around race and algorithms, and it's really hard to get people to understand how the internet sorts information, like just getting people to understand the same basic and like baseline info about how, Google search ranks things as first, second, and third. And when you add in then discussions about bias and race and how the Google is merely sorting everything else that's already out there, so is going to incorporate human bias into it and our racism in the US in particular. It can be alarming for some students because they want to believe that somehow tech is objective or operates autonomously from the rest of us or the messiness of humans, right? And so I really try to get them to understand the mechanisms by which they're being presented information, and then do the work of getting them to realize how culture gets baked into the product. But it's a difficult thing because the other thing I don't like to do in my classroom is get into the habit of banning certain information sources. Like back in my day, they banned Wikipedia. They said, it's not worth it. It's not worth your time. But in the right context and in the right environment, social media, Wikipedia could be a useful piece of evidence. Of course, not in a literature review, but in other instances, yes.
Okay, so that actually might be like a fair point. If you're trying to make a point of like, this Wikipedia entry was edited to say this on this date, then I could see using as a source of information, I suppose. Mountain Goddess, thank you. Do you think that leftists, not actual socialists, are a doorway to get to socialism? Okay, well, this is a complicated question. The left seems to be taking words that hang on, Mountain Goddess. I'm going to be really honest. It pisses me off that you sent this in. Thank you for the money. I appreciate the money. However, I feel like this is a question that you have asked a lot before, and I feel like I keep answering it for you. And I feel like you keep asking the same question in different ways because you are hoping and wishing and praying upon a star that I will give you a different answer than I've given you the other times that you've asked this question. The reason I bring this up is not to embarrass you, but I have to repeat myself on the internet every single goddamn day. The same things over and over and over and over and over again. And so when my own audience asks the same questions over and over and over and over and over again, even though I have given them an answer, and the answer has not changed, no matter how many times the question is asked, it gets to be a little bit frustrating. So I do appreciate that you sent this in as a super chat and are at least compensating me for making me repeat myself again. But the point that I have made earlier, and the point that I've made to you previously when you've asked the same question, is that Joan has not used the term whiteness. She has not used the term colonialism. She has not used the term capitalism because regular progressives do not speak in the same language as socialists. So the evidence that you have in front of you right now is proof that the left does not use the same language as socialists do in different ways. You can also refer to the video I posted 2 days ago, or like maybe a couple more days ago than that, maybe on Friday or something, within the last week, in which I flat out show you that when the left says whiteness, they mean capitalism, and they know they mean capitalism. They know in no uncertain terms. So no, everyone who is using those, okay, you know what? Go fuck yourself. Are you fucking serious? Are you retarded? Like, I dealt with the super chat, but like now you're following up, not listening again. You know what, Mountain Goddess? You can take a timeout. Thank you for the money. Enjoy your timeout. Stop asking me the same fucking questions over and over and over and over and over again. If you do it again, you're going to get banned. Now, to the question that we got from Tough Love. Which, Tough Love, I feel like you've been here when I've answered this question as well. New people are allowed to ask questions. The reason that Mountain Goddess just got a dressing down is because she has asked me the same goddamn question at least once a week, if not multiple times a week, for a long ass fucking time. I know who's in my chat. I pay attention. And when someone keeps asking me the same question over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, at some point, they're going to try my fucking patience. She has been warned on multiple occasions. If a new person has a question that is very different than someone who asks the same goddamn question at least once a week, if not more. It's just a respect thing, if I'm being honest about it. Like, when you are asking me the same fucking question over and over and over and over again, it means you are disrespecting my time. You're not listening to when I give you the answer in the first place, and you're just being a pain in the ass. And if I assess at some point that you're not capable of learning anything, I'm just going to remove you from the situation so you don't distract other people. We literally decoded this years ago now, fucking years ago.
Try to develop that critical attitude, one where we ask and ask. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Let's just continue that. So we're getting this question of, what do you do in the classroom? You said you wouldn't ban certain sources. Would you ban certain modes of speech? There's a question that comes up. What happens if you are if students are saying things because they have the freedom of chat that they wouldn't feel comfortable doing if they were in person or even?
The Johns Hopkins white privilege checklist, which has been around for a long ass time, because I damn well reported on that back in 2021. So don't think that's a new thing either. Fits into this in the exact same way that everything else fits into this, which is white privilege means beneficiary from capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. Anti-racism means anti-capitalism. White supremacy means capitalism. Colonialization means capitalism. Imperialism means capitalism. Everything means fucking capitalism. There is no exception to this rule, and I'm getting really really fucking tired of all the conservatives that have been watching my content for a long ass time pretend that they don't know the answer that I'm going to fucking give them when it is the same answer every single time. That checklist has been around for at least 3 goddamn years. I reported on it back in the day when it was first discovered.
Speaking on screen, do you just ban chat? Again, how would you advise someone to respond to
that? Yeah, that for me, I kept the chat. I've only taught
conservatives. Let me make this abundantly clear to you. There is no universe in which the left cares about what color your skin is. They do not care. What they care about is the system that upholds racism. That is what systemic racism is. It is the system. It is not your skin color. It is the fucking system. That's why they updated the dictionary definition in 2020 to include the system, which is capitalism. No matter how many times you ask this question, the answer is going to be the same. No matter how many checklists you show me about whiteness, the answer is going to be the same. And those of you who have been watching for a long time should damn well fucking know this, because we've been over it over and 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 over again.
Once on, Zoom University, and it was tough. It was tough. So much of learning happens in the 20 minutes I get to class early and the hour I stay afterwards, that helps students process things. It was also really hard to calibrate my teaching because I couldn't see their inquisitive faces. Most of my students did keep their cameras on, but Harvard gave me a time slot of 7:30 a.m.
They started using whiteness to refer to capitalism around about 2008, 2009, 2010, because that was really the death of any individualized racism in this country. That was also when the left started moving into destabilizing society. They started fucking with a lot of language. This is when you started seeing New York Times articles, Washington Post articles, Wall Street Journal articles going through the roof talking about systemic racism. That's about when it happened. That's not to say there was no transition. Of course there was transition, but that was about the time that it happened. Do not spam my chat.
Thursdays. So it was hard, because they're sometimes just grumpy. I mean, it's not that they didn't understand, it's just that they're tired. But when it comes to facilitating conversation, I try to make sure that, especially if I'm teaching a very contentious topic, that I don't just send them off into small groups. I encourage them to kind of have the conversations in front of each other to produce that kind of accountability. But you're right, chat can actually turn into a problem, especially if students start to argue with one another. And so I might make a comment in the classroom like, I can't keep up with the chat. And so sometimes that'll stop it. But for the most part, if you talk about the ground rules often and early about what we're going to count as truth in our class and what we're going to count as evidence and how we're going to understand media as part of this great power contest that we're seeing between government, tech, and some of the legacy media organizations, and then these up and comers that apps like Parler, for instance, that are going to try to punch Parler up in order to create market demand. And so we really just try to get students to understand that everything is contextual.
Are we down the rabbit hole and we'll never get out? One question is it possible
Joan
to get out
doesn't
of this
even
vortex?
know what rabbit hole she's down.
Some of the ways that we got here. Are we ever getting out?
No.
So
no, we're not. We are fucked.
It's difficult. Many of you have probably seen the movie The Social Dilemma. Now, what if I told you that actually is propaganda? That's advocacy. The psychologists from across the globe have been trying to figure out if tech addiction is the problem, and it's not. But it's a nice story, right? And it gets people to where...
Are you shitting me? Tech addiction is not a problem? Are you shitting me? That's really convenient for you, Joan, isn't it? Because you're a fucking social media professor. No, it's not the social media that's totally fucking us over. No, it can't be. Then I wouldn't have a job. What the hell?
The author of the story wants them to be, which is shutting off their devices. And so
we can't have that.
That is an unfortunate moment that we're in, where people think they're seeing research because it's packaged in a way where people who have experience creating tech products are talking about the state of the world, but they're actually, all they've done is created tech products. They actually haven't studied sociology. They haven't studied philosophy, communication, the humanities, or psychology in that case.
I've studied psychology.
And in doing so, we're actually moving towards a wrong proposition about the problem of disinformation and media manipulation.
Wow.
I've written about this for Harvard Business Review, which is essentially that media manipulation is it's a business. It begins with marketing. Politicians get involved. Everybody's got information.
Yeah. Why do we need social media? Antifa meets in person, so we don't need it. It's not like we can't go on Twitter and find all the fucking Antifa accounts, or the Antifa websites, or the Antifa Telegram groups. I'm in some fucking Antifa Telegram groups. We don't need the internet. We're totally not addicted. Promise. Pinky swear, bro.
To sell. And the other part that is more insidious is that it can move our politics. And as a result, we have to move towards a system of guardrails and oversight that make media manipulation and disinformation much less effective. That it doesn't begin with getting everyone to shut off.
No, Allison, I disagree with this. I really, really do. Allison says, I think some lefties from the DSA to revolutionaries purposefully act dumb about what they know their true goals are when interacting with people. No, we know that they don't, though, because we can tell by the language. We can tell by the language. You can tell. Listen, man, you can't just switch from speaking socialist to speaking normie without a few words here and there getting through. I don't speak socialist all day, every day. I can hear socialist. I hear socialist all day, every day, but I don't speak it all day, every day. So I can understand what they're saying without actually speaking their language. They live in this all day, every day. You can tell clearly that Joan is not a socialist. Joan is a useful idiot progressive. And if she wasn't, then there'd be words that would be slipping out, like capitalism, like whiteness, like imperialism, like colonial. Like there would be some word or some indication or some intonation. She doesn't even have the same intonation as a leftist. So no, I do not believe that they do this as a tactic. That is made up. They say, I've been to their goddamn events. They say the same thing in person that they say online. They say the same thing. It's the socialism conference in person, when there were no cameras in the room, was exactly the same as the socialist videos we watch online. There is no difference. So no, I don't think they're doing that. I don't think that's real.
Their telephones, because most of us can't opt out. I would love to be able to opt out of Zoom all day. I feel like I'm on AOL. I'm like sitting at my desktop. I used to have much more mobility in my life. But that's all to say that we're in a moment. Maybe it's a glitch. I don't know. But getting out of the rabbit hole begins with understanding the problem accurately, and then moving towards sets of solutions that are actually very specific to the social media companies' products themselves.
It does.
The bad thing about
understanding the product, the information is key. Peyton says accents are the only fake things from socialists. That's right. A lot of socialists do have fake English accents or British accents or Austrian accents because they want to sound more exotic, but all the rest is the same.
About Facebook is the ease by which you can share to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. A lot of that sharing is happening in private groups. And those private groups are safe havens for radicalization, misinformation, network conspiracy. So Facebook's got to step up to the challenge, and they've started to talk about how they're going to deal with groups. Twitter's a different beast in the sense that people go on Twitter to get attention from journalists. So the intervention isn't always trying to make something not trend on Twitter, although I've recommended to Twitter that they hire, well, egregiously, I said 10,000 librarians.
Not anymore,
maybe it's
Joan.
Not enough. To handle their trending topics so that when people are suggested information, they get timely, local, relevant, and accurate information. One of the chats is about, decolonizing the big T truth, which is, I think, also a very important point.
See, now there are socialists watching Joan because a socialist just asked in the Q&A about decolonizing truth on Twitter. So Joan might know what that means, but she hasn't used that language. She only used that language because the question was asked to her in the Q&A. Isn't that interesting?
Here, which is to say that we do want to have our social media ecosystem have a lever or have a way of giving us timely, local, relevant, and accurate information, both on demand, but also in steady flows. And we can look to actually the regulation around radio for some hints as to how we would do this. Back in the day, you'd put on the rock station, it would play rock music, there'd be some advertising, but there wouldn't be a DJ that would come on and say, and in local news, there's a city council meeting tonight, and there's a snow emergency. That had to be forced. That's called a public interest obligation. And so the future of our research actually is to try to think through, well, what are the public interest obligations that are going to help us get out of this moment and into a place where our media ecosystem is thriving, local, contextual, where people who have money and power aren't able to use the scale and the openness of social media to their advantage. And that's what I'm hoping our research reveals, is that we built a media ecosystem between the web and social media that is really tilted in favor of people who have money and power already. And, movements, pro-social movements for a long time had a first mover advantage because nobody cared what happened on Facebook in 2010. I dare you to go back and look at your Facebook in 2010. You were sharing maybe some cat memes. Maybe they weren't even sharing cat pictures. But that's all to say that a decade later, the internet and social media in particular have been weaponized to create very, very destructive tendencies in our democracy. And so the key isn't winding back the clock. The key isn't, shutting off our phones. The key, like all politics, is reining in the powerful and doing so in a way that is transparent and fair and clear, and then setting up new sets of rules so that the truth, which is, always slow out the gate, but is a very steady runner, truth can get over the finish line.
This is great, Joan. We just have time for one very short question, and we are going to make available the slides and material from this session for those who are not able to attend all of it. Joan, maybe you could just leave us with 1 minute on, if you're teaching a class and you've seen this and it scares the heck out of you, what would you advise to create a classroom in which there are potentially some guardrails, and yet people listen to each other? So you don't have students saying, I'm not going to listen to you, but at the same time, not everything is appropriate for the classroom.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really about the value set you show up with on that first day of class, which is, I am soft on deadlines. I am soft on, maybe I let the discussion go on a little too long. Sometimes someone's making a comment and I can tell they haven't done the reading. We've all been there. But I try to present the material with a level of inquisitiveness that is respectful of the diversity of the classroom, and acknowledging things like, before going in to talk about hate speech, I will talk about things like the history of scientific racism and how it shows up on YouTube. Just to say that a lot of the things that we experience as problems now are not new because technology has amplified and exacerbated them. But these are essential tensions of our society that need to be resolved through examination, through research, through careful consideration. And so engendering a culture of respect. But you can kind of tell very early on in a classroom if someone's going to try to dominate the conversation or to try to steer every opportunity for discussion.
I've seen enough. I know we only have 4 minutes left, but I've seen enough. I don't need to see any more. Okay, like, Joan might be a pain in the ass, and I'm not going to take away from the fact that I think that Joan is definitely a pain in the ass, but Joan is not a socialist. Joan is not a leftist activist. Joan is your run-of-the-mill progressive that doesn't even speak socialist. And it's like, this is someone we don't really need to worry about. So how I think about this is, I am really only right now interested in people who I think are steering the conversation in terms of leftist activism in institutions, in organizations, in publishing, in pushing all the crazy shit out there. Like, I'm not worried about people like this. She might be a pain in the ass, but I think she's a relatively harmless pain in the ass. And she's not someone that we need to worry about. So, like, I would not put her, like, in the Unwoke wiki or something like that. I wouldn't do a profile on her, because it's like, it diminishes what we're actually doing when I don't believe that she's, like, a hardcore activist. And so I think it is what it is. I'm glad we watched it. I've actually been wanting to investigate Joan for a while. And so I'm glad we watched it. I'm glad I've, like, crossed her off the list of, like, people I don't need to worry about. And I feel just a tiny bit bad about making fun of her weight, because, and I only did, like, I don't even know that I made fun of it that much. I'm just so sick of being called fat on the internet when, like, we watch way fatter people than me, like, all the goddamn time. So I feel just a smidgen bad about it, but not really. Because, like, she's probably heard way worse, honestly. All right, guys, that's all we have for the stream today. Now, as a reminder, it's Tuesday, and Tuesday means that we are doing Nothing Remotely Controversial with Joshua at 9:30 p.m. Joshua is back. Nothing Remotely Controversial is back. Let me see. Oh, well, we're already blocking friend in the chat. There we go. Actually, I'll go back and fix that later. But friend, we don't hang on. Can I just remove this? No, I can't, 'cause I'm not logged in. God damn it. Well, Chad is getting at least minimally a timeout, and if Chad ever comes back and brings that bullshit on my channel again, then Chad is going to get permanently banned, because he's now been warned several times not to use that language on my channel, and I don't fucking appreciate it. So guys, I will be back 9:30 tonight for Nothing Remotely Controversial, and if you get a chance and haven't done so yet, please make sure you subscribe to the Substack between now and then. And that's all I got for right now, guys. I'm gonna go get some dinner. And yeah, I'll see you later. Bye.